My sister's fiancé mocked me during dinner. Everyone laughed without stopping. I stayed quiet and took out my phone. I opened a file he never expected. His smile disappeared, and the room suddenly grew colder. I wonder how many have sat at their family table and felt left out. Have you ever seen your own family choose sides against you, or been ignored when it mattered most? I'd like to hear where you watch from, and what fairness means to you now. I'm the oldest son, now in my late 50s. My family always seemed close, at least on the outside. We had regular dinners and holiday gatherings. But even when we were kids, my sister was clearly the favorite. My mother and father gave her more attention. She was praised for everything, while I was often told to be quiet and not cause trouble. The gap between us grew as we got older. My sister got more support for school and hobbies. I was expected to handle things on my own. If I said something or asked for help, it was brushed aside. The message was clear. I should step back and let her take the lead. This wasn't said openly, but I knew. At family events, my sister's opinions mattered more. Decisions about money or plans usually favored her. I was there, but not really included. It started small, a comment here, an ignored question there. Over time, it became a pattern. I learned to keep my voice down and accept less. This favoritism wasn't just about attention. It affected how my parents treated me when it came to money and inheritance. I saw my sister get things that I wasn't even allowed to discuss. I never argued. I thought it was better to stay quiet than create problems. Looking back, I realized it was unfair. I wasn't treated as an equal son. The silence and exclusion burned, but I kept going. That was my way of coping. Still, the hurt stayed with me for many years. It shaped how I viewed my family and myself. We were all around the table for dinner at my parents' house. My sister's fiancé was there too. He had just started making jokes about my career. "Still stuck at the bottom," he said with a smirk. The room filled with laughter. My mother joined in without hesitation. I smiled, but the words hurt. The joke was nothing new. I had heard remarks like that before, from family and others. It wasn't just a joke itself. It was a silence around it. No one spoke up for me. No one said it wasn't funny or fair. My father cleared his throat and changed the subject quickly. He talked about the weather and some news on TV. Everyone moved on, but the mark was left there. I looked down at my plate and kept quiet. It was easier that way. My sister laughed along with her fiancé. She didn't notice or didn't care. My mother's eyes even flashed with amusement. I knew this was how it would always be. My progress, my efforts, they didn't seem to matter in this house. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, but the words stuck. I didn't want to stir trouble. I had learned over the years that fighting back often made things worse. It was better to hold my tongue and avoid the family drama. The meal continued with light conversation, but I stayed quiet. The joke hung in the air, unspoken but clearly understood. I was the one who was stuck. Everyone else saw it and accepted it as fact. No one tried to change the story. Later that evening, after the guests left, my father pulled me aside. He said, "Don't take it too hard. They don't mean it." I nodded but didn't say anything. I knew it wasn't just a joke. It was how they really thought of me. That night, I lay awake thinking about the years before, the times I was passed over, the times they treated my brother or sister better. This was just another moment in a long list. I wasn't surprised. I was tired. But I also knew something else. I knew I could build my own life outside their opinions. I just had to keep going. The joke was a small thing, but it showed me clearly where I stood in the family. I wasn't equal. Not then, not now. I didn't say anything that dinner. I just smiled and ate. But inside, I made a quiet decision. I would prove them wrong. Not by arguing or fighting. By working and building my own path. That was the only way forward. One evening, we gathered at my mother's house after dinner. My sister's fiancé had just gotten a small promotion at his job. My mother was quick to praise him, saying, "He's really going places now." She looked at me and added, "Unlike some people, he's making progress." I sat at the table, listening. My sister smiled but said nothing. I wanted to say something about my own work, but I stayed quiet. My efforts were never mentioned by her or anyone else. It was as if I wasn't there. My mother kept talking about the fiancé's new responsibilities and how proud she was. I tried not to show how much it hurt. I had been working overtime for years. I had taken extra courses to improve my skills. None of that mattered in her eyes. My sister watched the conversation, never defending me. Later, when we left, she said, "Mom's just proud of him." I nodded but thought it was unfair. I had done enough to deserve some recognition. At home, I told my wife what happened. She said, "You're doing well. That's what counts." Still, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being ignored. My mother's favor my sister's fiancé was obvious, and it stung. The next time I called my mother, I hesitated before speaking. She asked about my job briefly, and then switched topics. I knew she wasn't interested in hearing about my work. It was a pattern by then. That night, I looked at my hands. I realized I had to stop waiting for approval from them. I had to prove my worth in my own way. It was hard to accept, but I couldn't change how they saw me. The silence in that room stayed with me. I decided to focus on my career and not on their opinions. I didn't want to be invisible anymore. It was time to build my own path. When my parents decided to renovate the family house, money became a bigger issue. They asked me to help with repairs. I agreed, even though I had my own job and responsibilities. I spent most weekends there fixing things, painting walls, and doing small carpentry work. I never asked for payment. It felt like the right thing to do. Meanwhile, my sister's fiancé showed up occasionally. He never lifted a tool or did any work. Instead, he offered advice on how things should be done. My mother listened to him carefully. She even thanked him publicly for his leadership during family gatherings. I noticed she never said the same to me. At one point, I told my mother that I was tired and needed to slow down. She said, "We appreciate what you do, but your sister's fiancé has good ideas. You should listen more." I kept quiet. There was no point arguing. I knew what was really going on. The projects dragged on for months. I was the one buying paint and fixing plumbing issues, sometimes out of my own pocket. I never brought this up. My sister's fiancé would stand around and suggest changes while I work hard. My mother praised him often, calling him helpful and responsible. One afternoon, I was fixing the kitchen cabinets. My sister's fiancé came in and said, "You're doing it all wrong. Let me handle the planning." My mother nodded and said, "Good idea. He knows better." I said nothing. I stepped back and let him take over the conversation. I kept working quietly. My father wasn't involved much in the renovation. He said it was my mother's project. I hoped that when the work was done, the house would be better. I didn't want to think about the unfairness, but it was there. At family dinners, my mother often brought up how much the fiancé was helping. She said, "He has great vision for the house." I sat there, listening, while no one mentioned my efforts. It was embarrassing. I wonder if they saw me as less important. Once, my sister's fiancé asked me if I could get some tools from his garage. I did it without complaint. When I returned, he didn't say thank you. He just smiled and kept talking to my mother. I realized I was invisible in that part of the family. The unfairness wasn't just about work. It was about respect. My mother gave my sister's fiancé credit for things he didn't do. I was expected to do all the hard work and stay quiet. I couldn't tell if they wanted me there or not. I thought about stepping away from the renovation, but my father still hoped I would help finish it. My mother never offered to pay me. The money issue was clear. My sister's fiancé was treated like family already. I wasn't. After a few months, the house looked better. My mother thanked the fiancé in front of everyone again. I said nothing, but inside I was bitter. I worked hard and it was ignored. The disrespect was plain. That renovation was a turning point. It showed me how little they value my time and effort. It wasn't just about the house. It was about where I stood in the family. I knew I had to decide if I wanted to stay or walk away. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen when I overheard my sister and her fiancé talking in the living room. Their voices were low, but I caught their words clearly. My sister laughed and said, "He'll never move out. This house is his life sentence." Her fiancé chuckled and added, "Yeah, he's stuck here forever." I stood frozen for a moment, then left the room quietly. I didn't say anything right away. That evening after dinner, I found my mother alone in the sitting room. I sat down next to her and spoke softly. "Why do you let him talk about me like that?" I asked, meaning my sister's fiancé. She looked at me, surprised, then smiled a little. "He's just being playful. Don't take it to heart," she said. I looked away, holding back what I wanted to say. My mother didn't see the hurt in my eyes. I said nothing more. I bit my tongue and left the room quietly. I understood then that my mother didn't take it seriously. To her, it was a joke. To me, it was a clear sign I wasn't respected. That night, I thought about the conversation. It wasn't the first time I had felt invisible in my own home. My sister and her fiancé made it obvious I was always the outsider. They didn't hide their opinions. My mother's response only added to the feeling. She was protecting them, not me. The words stayed with me for days. I noticed how the house, which should have been my home too, felt more like a place I was tolerated in. I stopped joining family talks. I stopped sharing my plans. I knew they expected me to stay put, not to grow or leave. I didn't tell my mother again. I had learned that some things were better left unspoken. I focused on my own work and quiet routines. The disrespect was clear, but I had no proof anyone cared. My family's favoritism was a barrier I couldn't cross. This moment was a turning point. It made me realize I needed to find my own path outside their approval. I wasn't welcome the way I hoped. Their jokes were not harmless. They were reminders of my place in the family. Far from equal, I kept my distance after that. I visited less, spoke less. I saved money quietly. I knew eventually I would have to leave, not just the house, but the family's expectations. It was a slow decision, but that day made it clearer. The silence between my mother and me grew. We lived in the same house, but our worlds drifted apart. I wasn't angry. I was resigned. I focused on small plans, little steps that no one noticed. That evening, as I went to bed, I thought again about my mother's words, just being playful. I understood exactly what she meant. It was a way to avoid the truth, to keep things comfortable for them. But for me, it was cold and real. I knew then the house wouldn't be my home for much longer. It was theirs, in every sense except the one I needed. I had to find my own place, even if it meant leaving everything behind. A few months before my father's health took a downturn, my parents started talking about their will. My sister was there almost every time, and her fiancé too. I was told to listen, but not to worry. "You'll get what's fair," my mother said, but she never defined what that meant. During those meetings, the decisions were never really mine. My sister and her fiancé spoke confidently. My mother and father nodded along. I stayed quiet. When I asked questions, I was brushed off. "Just trust the process," my father said once, almost impatiently. At home, the atmosphere changed. I was no longer part of the family discussions. I knew what they were doing. They were planning the future, without me. It was clear my sister's plans mattered more. Her fiancé's involvement made it worse. He was treated like family already. I tried to bring up concerns with my mother. "Why isn't there a clear plan?" I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's complicated. We're doing what's best," she replied. I didn't press further. Words felt useless. My sister seemed to take every opportunity to show she belonged. She asked about the house, the accounts, the land. I was told, "Don't make problems now." When I tried to suggest a family meeting, my father said, "We'll handle it quietly." I understood that meant without me. I stayed longer in the room once, hoping to be included. My sister glanced at me. "You don't live here anymore," she said sharply. My mother didn't intervene. I left without another word. That moment sealed the distance. My role in the family was shrinking. I wasn't just sidelined. I was made to feel unwelcome. I began to avoid family gatherings. The house wasn't mine anymore, even though I'd lived there for years. My opinions, my history with them, didn't seem to matter. I thought about confronting my father again, but every time I lost courage. They had made their choice. My sister was a favored one, and her fiancé was accepted fully. I was the outsider. That was the truth. When I looked at my parents, I saw they were tired but determined. They wanted peace, or at least a version of peace they had chosen. I couldn't argue with that. I could only watch as the plans moved forward without me. The unfairness was clear. I was promised fairness, but given exclusion. I was told to trust, but trust was broken. It stung deeply, but I held back. I knew this was a turning point. I needed to decide whether to fight or walk away. I chose silence then, though the hurt stayed. The family I once knew was no longer the one I belonged to. The discussions made that clear. I wasn't part of their future. I was only a reminder of the past they wanted to leave behind. That dinner was a moment everything changed. It was supposed to be a quiet evening with my family and my sister's fiancé. I sat there, hoping for some normal conversation. Instead, he brought up my job again. He said, "You're the family charity case, always needing a handout." The words were sharp and loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother laughed right after. Her laughter cut deeper than the insult. My father didn't say a word. He just sat there, silent. No one defended me. No one told him to stop. The room went quiet except for my sister's fiancé, who kept smirking. I wanted to disappear. I looked down at my plate, trying not to show how small I felt. This was the first time I heard disrespect. But this time it hit harder. It was no longer behind closed doors or whispered remarks. It was out in the open, with everyone watching. I thought my mother would say something kind, or at least change the subject. But she just smiled and nodded like she agreed. My father avoided my eyes. I could tell he didn't want to get involved. It felt like they had all agreed to keep me in my place, the one they decided for me long ago. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to make a scene. But inside, I knew I couldn't stay in that room much longer. I excused myself and went outside to breathe. The night was cold, but it was better than sitting inside being humiliated. When I came back, the conversation moved on, as if nothing happened. My sister's fiancé talked about his job, his plans, and my family listened intently. I was there, but invisible. It was clear I didn't belong. Later, my mother said quietly, "Don't take it so hard. You should be grateful we still support you." I didn't reply. I had no words. I knew she thought she was generous. But I knew what that support really meant. Control and distance. That dinner was the last time I tried to fit in without question. I realized then that respect wasn't coming from them. It never had. They had made their choice long ago. And it wasn't me. After that night, I stopped going to family dinners. I stopped asking for advice or help. I started focusing on building my own life, away from their judgment. It wasn't easy. I had to work harder, take smaller steps, and face the world alone. But at least I wasn't shrinking at their table anymore. That evening marked the breaking point. It was a moment I decided to stop waiting for them to change. They had made it clear where I stood. I had to find my own way out of that shadow. I never told my father or mother how much that night hurt. I didn't want pity. I wanted fairness. But I knew that wasn't coming. I had to accept the truth and act on it. From that night on, I focused on building something for myself. Quietly but firmly. Without their approval or their help. It took years. But it was the only way I could hold my head up again. That dinner was a painful lesson. It showed me who my family really was. And who I could become without them. After the meeting ended, I didn't stay for the usual small talk. I quietly gathered a few things from my room. My suitcase was almost empty, but I packed enough to leave for a few days. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. There was no reason to. I stepped outside and locked the door behind me. Walking down the driveway, I looked back once. The house was silent. No one called out to stop me. No one asked where I was going. I knew they wouldn't. That night, I sat alone in a cheap motel room. No phone calls came. No messages. I checked my phone many times. The silence was complete. I realized then that I was invisible to them, unless they needed my help with something. Without that, I didn't matter. I wasn't angry. I was calm. I understood my place in their eyes was limited. They only saw me as someone useful for work around the house or the farm. Nothing more. No respect, no concern. The next morning, I thought about what to do next. I had no home there anymore. Staying longer without welcome was pointless. I knew I had to start planning a new life for myself, away from that family. It was a quiet decision. I didn't shout or argue. I just left. It was the only way to protect myself from more disappointment. The silence showed me everything I needed to know. I knew I had no future there. I was tired of trying to belong. They had made their choice without me. I accepted that. Leaving early was a first step in choosing my own path. It was difficult, but necessary. I needed to find a place where I was more than just a worker, somewhere I could have real value. That night, I didn't look back again. I didn't want to. Their world was closed to me. I was free to build a new one elsewhere. I decided to stop waiting for my family to change. Their disrespect and favoritism were constant. I knew I had to focus on myself. So, I took extra hours at work whenever I could. There was no use hoping for an apology or fairness from them. The work was hard and tiring. I learned new skills on my own, even after my regular shifts. Some nights, I stayed late just to finish extra training modules. It was slow progress, but I was moving upward. I kept track of every extra dollar I earned. I saved everything I could. No new clothes, no eating out. I cut back on anything unnecessary. The money went into a small savings account. It felt good to have some control over my own future. At first, my family noticed I stopped coming to dinners. I was there for years, but the invitation stopped without a word. When I asked, my mother said, "You don't really fit in anymore." My brother didn't say anything. They acted as if I chose to be left out. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just kept my distance. The dinners had become another place where I was reminded I was less important. It was better to be away than humiliated. I used that time to work and learn instead. It was lonely at times. Not having family around can weigh on a man. But I told myself this was temporary. I was building something better, something they couldn't take away. My effort was a quiet kind of rebellion. With every promotion, I felt less dependent on their approval. I wasn't the ignored son anymore. I was becoming a man who could stand alone. I didn't expect them to notice. I didn't need them to. I watched from a distance as family events went on without me. I heard through others how they talked about me. I stayed silent. It was no longer my battle to fight. I was fighting for my life outside their world. Even when my younger brother got help from my mother for his business, I did not ask. I made my own way. I was tired of favors that came with strings attached. I wanted something I earned myself. Over time, my work gave me stability. I rented a small place on my own. It was modest, but mine. I painted the walls and fixed the leaky faucet myself. It was a different kind of home than what I grew up in. I never went back to family dinners. Invitations stopped, so did my interest. I had built a routine where I was respected, even if just by my boss and colleagues. That meant more than any dinner where I was ignored or insulted. Slowly, I stopped caring about being included. I cared about being steady. I cared about my own peace. My family's rejection hurt, but it taught me to rely on myself. That lesson stayed with me every day. I didn't reach out or call. I let the silence grow. They made their choice by excluding me. I was not going to chase them. Instead, I chased a better life. It took time, patience, and quiet work. Looking back, I realized how much I sacrificed. Not just money, but a part of myself. But I also gained something they never gave me, respect that I earned with my own hands. That was worth everything. Years passed after I left the old family home behind. I got a small apartment in a quiet part of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I paid every cent with my own money. Starting a business wasn't easy. I worked long hours and saved carefully. There were moments when I doubted myself. Still, I didn't ask my mother or brother for help. They had already shown where they stood. I wanted to prove I could stand on my own. At first, the business was just a side thing. I took small jobs and built a client base. Slowly, things improved. I rented a small office, hired one assistant, and kept growing. There were times I missed family support, but I knew I wouldn't get it. I focused on what I could control. My mother never called to check on me. My brother ignored me completely. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they talked about me dismissively. They said I was too slow, too weak. It didn't stop me, but it stung. I stopped trying to change their minds. The apartment was my sanctuary. I fixed it up modestly. I kept it neat and comfortable. It gave me peace after years of tension. Having my own place was a relief from feeling unwanted. When the business showed signs of success, I felt more confident. I paid my taxes on time. I saved money for emergencies. I bought a reliable car with cash. I was no longer the family's forgotten son. I was finally stable. Sometimes people asked about my family. I kept it short. We don't have much to do with each other, I said. No point explaining years of disrespect. I wanted to focus on my work and my future. I still thought about the unfairness. How my brother had taken what should have been mine. How my mother chose to believe his version every time. But I didn't let that bitterness control me. That past was behind me. The business grew slowly but steadily. I signed contracts with bigger clients. I hired more employees. I made sure everything was legal and transparent. I wanted to build something lasting, something real. My brother's company faced troubles later. Rumors came back to me. His projects failed. He struggled to pay debts. I didn't feel joy hearing that. It was a reminder of how different our paths had become. I didn't reach out to them. Not once. I knew my place in that family was no longer a brother or a son who mattered. I had my own life now. I had respect from colleagues and friends. I had built a quiet, steady life. Looking back, I see those years as a slow climb. Each month, each small deal mattered. I never rushed or expected shortcuts. I didn't need anyone's pity or support. I needed only my own effort and time. I'm not wealthy by any means, but I owe no one. I'm in control of my finances and my future. The apartment and the business are proof of that. They represent years of work and standing firm. The silence from my mother and brother is total. They don't ask about me, and I don't ask about them. It's a distance that feels permanent now. I accepted that long ago. Still, I don't regret what I did. Leaving was hard, but staying would have meant more humiliation. I chose dignity over false hope. I chose to rebuild with my own hands. That's where I was stable and independent. Not rich, not famous, but free from their control. The past was behind me. The future was mine to build. After a while, I heard that my sister's fiancé lost his job. The news came quietly through a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years. They mentioned it in passing, as if it wasn't important. I knew my sister's marriage was not going well, but I stayed out of it. It was none of my business anymore. At the same time, the house my parents lived in was falling apart. The roof leaked, the garden was overgrown, and the walls had cracks. I heard neighbors talk about how the place looked neglected. No one from my family stepped up to fix anything. The house was still under my parents' name, but nobody volunteered to help. My mother and father didn't ask me directly. I didn't expect them to. My older brother had taken charge of most decisions since I left. He said once, "You don't live here anymore. Let it be." That was the last I heard about repairs or maintenance. My sister's fiancé was supposed to help, but after losing his job, he was no use. I thought about calling to offer help. I really did, but I knew it would be ignored or turned into a reason to insult me. They never thanked me for anything before, so I stayed silent. Watching from a distance was painful, but safer. The neighbors shared bits and pieces. One told me, "No one's fixing that place. It's a shame." Another said, "You'd think your brother would do something." I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say that would change anything. It was clear the house was becoming a problem, yet no one took responsibility. I remembered how my brother insisted the house was his legacy and mine was smaller. Now, even that legacy was crumbling and no one cared. I thought about how fairness was never part of the plan. My sisters stopped coming around too. I heard their fights grew worse. Some said she was unhappy, but she never spoke with me. I wish she would. I want to say, I'm here if you need help. But I guess she was caught in the same silence as the rest. The years of avoidance, the quiet exclusion, it all showed in how the family fell apart. No one fixed the house. No one reached out. I wasn't surprised. I had seen it all before. The house was a symbol of the family's divisions. It needed care, but none was given. The silence around that place was louder than any words. It was a sign of how far we had drifted apart. My sister's troubles, the fiancé's job loss, the empty house, they all marked the same thing. A family that no longer were together. I didn't visit or call. I kept my distance. It wasn't pride. I knew they wouldn't welcome me. The damage wasn't just in the walls, but in all the small refusals that built up over time. At this point, I accepted that the family was broken in ways that couldn't be fixed with repairs or words. The neglect spoke for itself. I waited to see what would come next, but I didn't hold my breath. Some months after I left the family house for good, my mother called me. She said she was behind on bills and that the house needed repairs. She asked if I could help. I was quiet on the phone, not sure what to say. My sister's fiancé got involved too. He called me a few days later, asking if I could lend him some money. He told me about his own struggles and how a loan would fix things for a while. I listened without interrupting. I knew why they called me now. They remember my bottom job from years back, the one I had to take when nobody else would give me a chance. Now that I was doing better, they saw me as a source of cash. I did not forget how they treated me before. The old disrespect was still there beneath the surface. I told my mother I couldn't send money. I said, I can offer advice, not cash. She was quiet after that. I explained how I had worked hard to get where I was. I said, I don't have spare money to give away. There was no anger in my voice, just facts. When my sister's fiancé called, I was direct. I'm not lending money. Find another way. He argued a bit, but I stayed firm. I didn't owe them anything. I was not their bank. They could manage their problems themselves. They tried to guilt me, saying family should help family. I answered, family also means respect. I reminded them how they ignored me when I needed them. I said, you didn't help before. Why expect it now? The conversation ended quickly. I gave my mother some advice about downsizing and budgeting. I told her where to find help for repairs and bill relief. I didn't want to leave her without support, but I drew clear lines. I would not be used again. It was hard to hear them ask for help after all the years of neglect. It hurt to be remembered only when money was needed, but I had no intention of getting pulled back into their old patterns. I was careful now. I listened, but I protected myself. Their calls stopped after that. I didn't reach out again. The silence said more than words. They were learning I was not the same person they had taken for granted. I had limits, and I would stick to them. This experience confirmed my decision to keep distance. I helped where I could without losing myself. I was no longer the forgotten son. I was a man who earned his own way and set his own terms. That was enough for me. Looking back, I see I am stronger for walking away. It took years to accept it, but leaving that family environment was the right choice. The disrespect and favoritism were constant. I could not change them, no matter how hard I tried. So I stopped trying. My brother and mother made their decisions. They chose to exclude me from the inheritance and family matters. I accepted that. It hurt, but I accepted it. I did not fight bitterly. I focused on building my own life. That was the only way forward. Over time, I found peace. It's quiet now, and that peace matters more than anything. I am not entangled in old disputes or false promises. I am free from the weight of their judgments and insults. That freedom lets me breathe. My family faces the consequences of their choices. My brother is burdened by debt and poor relationships within his own family. My mother lives mostly alone now. They have regret and distance between them. I hear about it sometimes, but I don't get involved. They have their path, and I have mine. I am financially stable from years of steady work and careful saving. I have a quiet home where respect is mutual. I am not rich, but I am secure. That security is something I earned without their help. Sometimes I think about what could have been, but there is no anger in those thoughts, only clear understanding. I was never truly part of that family's inner circle. I tried to be, but they would not have it. I accepted that reality. My contact with them is limited to rare phone calls and messages. Those conversations are polite but distant. There is no talk about the past or shared memories. That silence is uncomfortable, but it is also necessary. It protects me. I do not hold grudges. I just know my worth. I learned it the hard way, outside their approval. That lesson is valuable. It shaped who I am today. I value fairness and respect now. They may regret how they treated me, but I cannot depend on that. What matters is how I live now. I am calm, steady, and independent. I have no illusions about their feelings toward me, and I no longer need their validation. Leaving was not easy, but it was needed. It allowed me to grow and heal. I chose peace over conflict. I chose dignity over humiliation. And that choice made me stronger than they imagined. I am not the same man who stood silent at family gatherings. I am someone who found his own way. My family's mistakes are their burden. My life is mine to build. That is the truth I live with today. I have accepted that I did what I could with what I had. The distance from my family gave me room to build a life on my own terms. It was not easy, but I kept working, saving, and making steady progress. I don't hate them for what happened, though it was unfair and painful. Holding on to anger would have only kept me stuck. Over the years, I learned not to expect fairness from those who had shown none. I stopped hoping for apologies or recognition. They chose their path, and I chose mine. The quiet I found away from their judgment allowed me to focus on my own well-being and future. I don't need their approval or support to feel complete. What they took from me cannot be returned, but I have built something stable and respectable. I am financially secure now, and I have a small circle of friends and colleagues who respect me. That means more than any inheritance or family title ever did. Sometimes I think about what might have been if things were different, but dwelling on it does not help. The past is the past. I am at peace with having limited contact and keeping my distance. It protects me from further disrespect and disappointment. In the end, I measure my success by my choices and efforts, not by their acceptance. I have what I have earned, and that is enough. I carry no bitterness, just a quiet certainty that I took the right path for myself. It has been many years since the last big fight with my brother and mother. Now, I see them only at weddings or funerals. We speak politely, keeping conversations short. There is no warmth, but no harsh words either. I keep my distance, and they respect that. My life is quieter now. I live in a small home I bought with my own savings. It is stable and peaceful. I manage my work and finances carefully, without relying on anyone else. This independence is important to me. I don't expect much from my family anymore. Their choices made that clear. They decided who mattered and who didn't. I accepted that and moved on. Holding on to anger only hurt me. Sometimes I think about the past. The unfairness still stings, but I focus on what I built. I have good friends and steady work. I am not wealthy, but I am secure. That is enough. At family events, I keep to myself mostly. I no longer try to change their views. They made their decisions long ago. I am content to be quiet and watch from a distance. In the end, I have what I made. No one gave it to me. I have learned to live with what was done. I see my family less, and that suits me fine. This is my life now. I spent years accepting that my family didn't see me as equal. They ignored my needs and made jokes at my expense. I worked hard to build a life away from their shadow. Still, I wonder if walking away was the right choice. Was I too distant? Or did I protect myself from more harm? What would you have done if your own family laughed at your expense? Would you have stayed and tried to change things? Or quietly moved on like I did? I'm curious how others handle such unfairness in their own families. Sometimes, fairness is a word only some hear. What do you think?